another episode of the Coffee Break Podcast. Wherever you are, whether you're listening to this or you're watching this on YouTube, I hope you're having a great week. And I hope that you're making progress in your department or organization towards a healthier, more respectful work culture. Today, I am really excited to have a conversation with you about your newest graduate nurses, okay? If you hire new nurses in your organization, this is going to be an episode that might save you, well, let's just say a lot of time, a lot of aggravation, because I'm not sure that you all know this about me, but before I started my own company to address disruptive behaviors, I was responsible for the new grad experience across a system, a large health system. So I developed new nurse residency programs, preceptor programs. I was responsible for the student nurse internship programs, the student experience, professional development, and, a bunch of other things. I know that population well. And when I became a nurse manager and was trying to hire new graduate nurses, I really saw that experience from a different perspective, really from your perspective. And with the work that we do to address workplace bullying and incivility, this work right now is incredibly important for this new graduate nurse population. And I wanted to talk about what's happening out there right now and why it's so important that you prioritize protecting these newest nurses. Or if you don't, they're going to leave you. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you a glimpse into what's happening across the country. We're going to talk about some strategies that you can adopt to protect your newest graduate nurses. And then I'm going to let you know about a few resources that we have available for you to take the next step. All right. Studies show that about 31% of our newest graduate nurses are quitting within their first year. And I believe that number goes up to about 48% in their second year. I'm going to tell you, they're not leaving to make $2 an hour more, down the street. They're quitting because of how they're being treated by their coworkers. And recruitment and retention right now are huge priorities for leaders. We hear about this all the time. What are your biggest challenges? Recruitment and retention. Well, you can recruit all you want, and you can bring in as many newly graduated nurses as you want. But if you don't create an environment where they feel safe, supported, and they feel that they belong, they will leave you. Okay? All right, so first I want to talk about how do you actually protect your newest graduate nurses. When I was in this role responsible for, developing a new nurse residency program and, that whole experience of the new graduate nurse, I really took a look at what were their biggest fears when they start working. And actually the work that I did in my doctoral program, I developed a program to protect and bully-proof senior nursing students before they start their first job. Again, I know this population. Students becoming new graduate nurses fear two things. Number one, they fear that they're going to kill a patient. They actually say that. We're afraid they're going to kill a patient. And number two, they fear their preceptors and the people who are working in their department, because sometimes they get eaten alive. And even though we've said for years, nurses eat their young, and we are working on this, because I always say now we eat our young, our old, and everything in between, because sometimes the new nurses are the problem. They are still the most vulnerable. So the first thing that I want you to do is think about, how do we protect our newly graduated nurses from their coworkers? Something that's been happening a lot over the last 2 years, really since about a year or so after the pandemic hit. Our clients, our leaders are reaching out to me saying, oh my gosh, I have my experienced nurses in my office almost every day complaining to me about how unprepared these new graduate nurses are. They don't know anything. They can't even do a piggyback. I asked one, to insert a Foley catheter, and she looked at me like I had two heads. Oh my gosh, they don't pay me enough to teach these students or teach these nurses. And we know this. We know that they're the least prepared new nurses we've ever experienced. So my approach to this is to tell your experienced nurses, okay, when they come to you and they're complaining, anytime you can admit or, acknowledge that somebody is right, do it, because it disarms them. So when they say they are so ill prepared, look them in the eye and say, oh my God, you're right. They are unprepared. But then remind them that it's not their fault. So quit being so mean to them. They learned how to be nurses during a global pandemic when we would not let them in the building. They learned how to take care of patients in a sim lab or virtually. The experienced nurses complaining that these new nurses are not prepared is not helpful. But you got to call them on it. Tell them, yes, they're right. They are not prepared. It's not their fault. Stop being so mean to them. Instead, let's help them. So here's your strategy. Get together with your experienced nurses and you say to them, all right, in our department, what are the top 3 skills that you think every nurse here needs to master? Maybe on a cardiac unit, I'm an old cardiac nurse. You better know the difference between sinus rhythm and say AFib, or how about sinus rhythm and VTAC? Okay, you might need to start there. It's a little bit more challenging to differentiate between the different blocks, but how about you just start simple? Like, they need to know their rhythms. Okay, what else? But ask them. Pick 3 skills. You will always hear this from me. The brain loves the number 3. It's easy for the brain to act on 3 things versus 4 or 5, okay? 3 things. And then all of your team, focus on making sure all of those new nurses can master those 3 skills. Then you pick 3 more and so on. But what's happening if you don't do this is that the first time a new nurse asks a question to an experienced nurse, or they admit they don't know how to do something, if that experienced nurse rips their head off or makes them feel stupid, they will never ask again, and they will wing it. And I'm sure you can imagine the negative impact if you have a group of new nurses who are winging patient care. So this is such a serious matter because it impacts patient safety. So get together with your experienced nurses, tell them that these new nurses are ill-prepared. It's not their fault. Stop being mean to them, and instead we're going to help them. And this is how we're going to help them. I had told you earlier that these new nurses fear their preceptors. You and I both know there are a lot of people in the role of the preceptor who should not be preceptors. Unfortunately, there are times when you don't have a choice. You need preceptors to orient these new nurses. I am going to ask you to pay attention and be more selective. You want preceptors who are good role models, okay? You want preceptors who are, oh my gosh, kind, respectful, that they actually want to help onboard, new employees, especially new nurses. I know myself, when I was working per diem, and I would go into, and this was just not that long ago, I would, if somebody said, oh, we have a student here, or, we have a new person, but the preceptor's not here, and who's going to take them? Like, I'll take them. I love helping new nurses, but not everybody does. However, you have to make sure that your preceptors, first of all, are equipped with the knowledge, skills, and tools to make sure their new graduate nurses are protected from their coworkers, okay? And there are ways that you can do this, but they have to know the difference between bullying and civility and somebody having a bad day. They need to understand the important role that they have and, their behavior and how it impacts that new grad experience. And then I always like to work with preceptors to help them protect these newest graduate nurses. And I think in terms of some of the, let's say, high risk moments in anyone's sort of shift report. Shift report is where I've seen a lot of new graduate nurses be attacked, nitpicked to death, made to feel stupid. So you have to make sure your preceptors know to stand by them and actually protect them. If an experienced nurse starts nitpicking them to death, that preceptor needs to step in and say, time out here. We're not going to do this. We're not going to play this game. Basically stop it. All right. And then think in terms of how assignments are made. Your preceptor needs to be working with your charge nurse or whoever makes assignments to make sure that during orientation, the preceptor and the new graduate nurse isn't getting dumped on because there's two of them. Okay. Oh yeah, well, you could take more and more difficult patients because there's two of you. Not true. That's a whole other conversation. But that the assignments are fair, especially when that new graduate nurse comes off of orientation. And then we know that, let's just say, some of the people in your department love to make fun of the newbies, love to gossip about the new employees, especially your newly graduated nurses, especially if any of them are struggling. And you really need to make sure you shut down any of that gossip. I swear people forget what it was like to be new. So far we've talked about protecting your new nurses, and you protect them from the other people, their coworkers, by reminding them that they learned during a time when they didn't have access to actual patient care. So again, stop being mean to them and instead helping them. And then really focus on your preceptors, making sure your preceptors are equipped with the skills and tools that they need to protect those newest nurses. And then another strategy is, all right, we've talked about having that honest conversation with your experienced staff. We've talked about making sure your preceptors understand that part of their role is to protect those, new nurses. Well, you also need to equip these new nurses with the skills and tools that they need to actually address disruptive behaviors, confront disruptive behaviors. And I look at it from this perspective. They need to know what bullying is and what it's not. Because I'm going to tell you something, constructive feedback is not bullying. But this is very common where a newly graduated nurse receives constructive feedback, criticism from their preceptor, and right away they pull the bully card. Oh, I'm being bullied by my preceptor. Yeah, that's not bullying. And in a little while, I'll give you a tip on how you can prevent that from happening. But they need to understand what bullying is, what it's not, how it shows up, and what they can do about it. We do a lot with confronting techniques. We have our famous name it, speak it, script it techniques. And in the show notes, I'll actually include a resource for you. It's Scripts to Stop Disruptive Behaviors. And this is a great resource that you can actually download, print, and give it to your newly graduated nurses. Heck, you can give it to everybody in your department, because it's just, I know myself, I don't know what to say sometimes in the moment when somebody's being mean to me or somebody embarrasses me. But the next day in the shower, I can think of all sorts of things to say. But by then, it's usually too late. I developed these scripts to help me originally, and then realized that a lot of people struggle with knowing what to say in the moment too. So it's just powerful scripts to stop bad behavior in the moment. So you can find a link to that in the show notes. We also need to nurture them. Okay, there are strategies to help you nurture your newest nurses. And we actually have a resource that I'll also put in the show notes called 9 Ways to Welcome and Protect Your New Graduate Nurses So That They Stay. And I'm going to share one of those strategies with you right now, but the rest you can get in that resource that you'll, again, find in the show notes. Onboarding your newly graduated nurses doesn't start day one of orientation. It starts way before that. It starts basically as soon as they say, I do. One of the most powerful strategies that you can adopt that also addresses one of their biggest fears is have their preceptor call that newly graduated nurse a week or so ahead of time, a week or so before their first day of work. And basically that preceptor is to say, hey, hi, Tina. My name is Renee. I'm going to be your preceptor. I am beyond excited that you're going to be working with us. Okay, you're starting on Monday or Wednesday, whenever they start. Do you know where you're going? Do you know what to wear? Do you have everything that you need? What questions do you have? It basically alleviates that fear of, is my preceptor a bully? Is my preceptor part of the problem? Does my preceptor want to be a preceptor? So if the preceptor can call ahead of time to say, hey, I'm excited you're going to be here. Whew, that decreases their stress level immediately. And then it really helps them, first of all, to feel welcomed. And then also you can answer some questions that sometimes, that first day can be a little chaotic and they may not be sure where to go unless they did some clinicals or worked in that organization. But that's a tip. And there are 8 others that you can get in that resource that we'll have in the show notes. And then finally, this will help you to address that. I get constructive feedback and I say my preceptor's the bully situation. You need to establish a culture of relentless feedback for really everyone, but especially for your newly graduated nurses. This was something that when I was responsible for preceptors and new nurses, I would set that intention for feedback. I would meet with my new nurse and I would say this: my goal, my intent is to help you to be a successful nurse here. And then I would define what success meant to me. I want you to be the type of nurse that I want to work with at 2:00 in the morning in a crisis situation, when you don't have anybody else but yourselves. Or the type of nurse who I want caring for my precious family. And in order for me to do that, I'm going to give you feedback. I'm going to tell you the good. I'm going to tell you the bad. And if I have to, I'm going to tell you the ugly. And I'm going to need you to be open to it. Okay? Because remember, my goal, my intent is to help you to be successful. And then what you do is every day, preceptor's working with that new nurse. You have the preceptor say to that new nurse at the end of the day, the end of the shift, whenever that is, hey, here's one thing you did really well. Be specific. Here's one thing I'd like you to work on. Be specific. If you present it in that way, here's something that I'd like you to work on. It's received easier, and it shows that we all have something we need to work on. So establish a culture of relentless feedback right from the beginning. So I want you, if you're listening to this and you're a frontline manager, have a conversation with your preceptors about this. If you're in an education role, nursing professional development, have a conversation with your preceptors about this. If you're in an executive role, you get the point. Don't assume that they know this, because I'm telling you, they don't. But it's making sure that you establish ongoing, relentless feedback as a habit here in our department. Okay, we've talked about protecting them. We talked about your preceptors. We talked about equipping them, especially with the knowledge, skills, and tools that they need to confront disruptive behaviors. We've talked about feedback. And then finally, we've talked a little bit about how to nurture them. The one last thing that I would add to this is, I know we're focused in this podcast on newly graduated nurses, but it's not just protecting them and helping them acclimate to the other nurses in your department. It's really looking at them as part of the entire interprofessional team. I remember when I was a brand new nurse, I was petrified to talk to doctors. Physicians scared me. They intimidated me. And I want you to think about this. When you're in nursing school, they won't let you talk to physicians. But as soon as you graduate and you start working, call the physician. Well, I didn't know how to do that. And I was intimidated. And it took me a long time to get over that. And what helped me to get over that was really two things. My confidence as I learned. But then it was easier for me when one of the physicians or providers actually was nice to me, or they, introduced themselves to me and they made a comment about, oh, you're new here. That's great. We're excited that you're here. So anytime you can introduce your new nurses, any new employees, to the entire team, not just their coworkers, the other nurses and, techs and, PCTs, but to the entire interprofessional team. It's going to help them to decrease some of that anxiety and stress and feelings of intimidation because, we're trying to flatten this hierarchy just a bit to show that every single person on the team plays a valuable role and to really help them to build a relationship with everybody on the team, especially physicians and providers, will really help them to feel that they are contributing, to feel a sense of belonging, and it'll decrease that anxiety that they have in actually communicating with physicians, which all leads to better patient outcomes. It all does. Okay, I'm going to wrap this one up. I've mentioned several times now that I will have some additional resources for you in the show notes. I also want to let you know that as an organization here at the Healthy Workforce Institute, we recently developed curriculum related to graduate nurses, and it's our graduate nurse anti-bullying curriculum. This curriculum does not replace your existing residency program. It's designed to augment your existing program with just the content related to bullying and incivility. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. If you're interested, someone on our team would be more than happy to hop on a call with you and talk about whether this program is the right fit for you. And as we end, I just want to thank you for listening, for doing your part to cultivate a healthy work culture. It really starts with you, and it starts with how are you onboarding these new people? And we've talked heavily, primarily about newly graduated nurses, but just copy paste and insert any role, any new employee into your organization. Most of these principles still apply. And so I want to thank you for being here. And if you're enjoying this podcast, if you find this podcast helpful, please review, share, rate, and, feel free to make sure that you're incorporating these strategies, not only into your department, but share these strategies with others in your organization. Thanks so much for being here. Take care, everyone.